sing about killing cops and beating and raping women. But you wonder, do young people take the lyrics of these songs in the 90s, do they take them to heart? Are they influenced by them? In Australia, of course, you may not realise, there are absolutely no censorship laws when it comes to records. Record companies merely decide which CD should carry a warning label. Then you have to ask, can they be trusted to look after our kids? Do songs with four-letter words and with the lyrics, songs about the dark side of life, do they in fact encourage antisocial behaviour amongst the teenagers? Now, to discuss all this, will you please welcome Rob Halford, who's a former heavy metal band player and Judas Priest, and they were blamed for the suicides of two fans. Welcome concerned mum Liz Layton and child psychiatrist Dr. Graham Martin. Thank you. I think, right from the top, I think it's indicative of what we're talking about today, is that I have to warn viewers that some of the lyrics that are in the songs we're talking about, they will find offensive, even though we've blipped some of them out with asterisks, etc. They are lyrics that I could not sit here at this time, 10 to 1 in the daytime, in adult viewing time, and read them. I'd be off air. Now, that says something about how far we've come, doesn't it?
It says an awful lot. I mean, I sat down and I decided to listen to what my son was listening to, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, these words are, they are demeaning to women, they are violent, they're racist, they're anti-white, they're totally anti-white in our society. And I mean, you've got young white people who are anti-white, anti-establishment, anti-everything.
Well, the anti-establishment side's always been there.
Absolutely.
I mean, back when they thought that Elvis Presley was evil, Bill Haley was evil, and especially the Rolling Stones were evil. So that's been there.
I think, can I ask you what your son's listening to right now? What kind of music?
Rap music.
He's listening to rap music?
Yeah,
well,
hardcore rap. Niggers with attitudes, lynch mob. I mean, those are the lyrics that I sent through to Darren. That I mean, there's no way in the world that you could allow children to have
Rob,
this.
you were, first of all, I should point out, you were the new band called Fight, and at your old band, you were cleared of any involvement in those suicides.
In that trial, yeah. Well, I mean, the basic issue there was an accusation by the prosecution that we'd put in these so-called subliminal messages into our music, which of course was completely false. And what we found out instantly when the trial began was that the real issue here was the fact that the parents weren't doing the right job in looking after their kids. You know, these kids were running wild, drinking and smoking drugs and so forth. Now, it's for me. I mean, I've been in the rock and roll profession for over 20 years of my life, and I've been through that whole stage as a rebellious kid and so forth. And so I think I have a real understanding of the issues that we're talking about here today. They are important, obviously, and I think it's something that does need to be discussed and looked at when it has something of real important value. But to me, I think that it's just a simple stage, a progression that most kids go through in growing up, and I would say that 99.9% of them come out of it completely harmless. They enjoy their music, they get the pleasure, they get the entertainment, they get the enjoyment. What kind of message or factual involvement they get from it in terms of taking what they listen to and putting it into their own lives, I think is a very small percentage.
Well, let's go, Dr. Martin. The question that's in my mind, and I haven't got the answer to it, is it the music that can depress a teenager so much that they contemplate suicide, or is it a teenager who's feeling the pressures and contemplating suicide who then becomes obsessed with certain music? I'm talking chicken and egg thing here.
Sure. I mean, our research showed that it was probably the latter, which is that kids who were really struggling, that they had difficult backgrounds, they'd got into drugs and alcohol, were actually looking for a group with whom they could identify and who made them feel better, who gave them self-esteem, where other groups in society weren't giving them self-esteem. So they sought this group out, and it was almost as if the music was echoing something inside them, was actually allowing them to work something through. Having said that, it seemed to us that the ones who were really going for the heavy metal were actually the most distressed and the most disturbed. They had the most disturbed backgrounds in terms of broken families. They were the ones who were drinking most. They were using other substances, marijuana, whatever. And they also had a history of suicide in the past much more frequently.
You know, my teenager, when he was a teenager, at 14, was into heavy metal, and he was talking about Iron Maiden, and I thought he meant Margaret Thatcher. I mean, I'm totally gone from it. But let's get back to things like, I mean, looking in as role models. Ice-T sings about killing policemen, killing the pigs, and Charlton Heston came out and attacked that in a speech. Another group whose name escapes me talked about sodomising the 12-year-old nieces of Tipper Gore, the wife of the Vice President of the United States. Now, surely this can be harmful to an impressionable child.
And parents, I believe, what I want to do, Darren, is make everyone, like how many mums out there? You've got teenagers. Do you know what your kids are listening to? Sit down and listen to tapes. There's one that I found from a group called Niggers with Attitudes. And the opening line talks about how what happens when you have oral sex, and it's in 2 lines and it's so explicit. And it goes on to get worse and worse and worse. Well, listen to the words. Well,
I talk about my family. I mentioned my 23-year-old stepson now, and I said one of the bands I talk about is Red Hot Chili Peppers. And he's like, they're not very bad. They're not bad. And they're very popular with 12 and 13, 14-year-olds. Yeah. I then got the lyrics out, and we can look at some of them, I hope, at some stage. But I got the lyrics out, and there's stuff in that which is just amazing. I mean, there's one about raping a policewoman. And the stuff that we haven't showed you, which I said I'd be tossed off air if I ran it. And you wonder then, should there be? You can't ban it because kids will think it's even better and get hold of it. But should there be like an R system where, like, they can't go to movies unless they're 18? So should there be that sort of situation to see?
I think there's if you're talking about responsibility here, I think there's a fact that I mean, from my point of view as an artist, I demand the right to be able to express myself freely with my music. Yeah, to adults, and I'm not opposed to some kind of guidelines. Now, I've always been opposed to censorship, and I always will be, but it's those lyrics that you just put up on there on that screen are no different to the girly mags you can go into any news agent in Sydney or anywhere in Australia.
That is being pumped into those children's head with that rap music.
It's not being pumped into it. They have the choice to go into a record store and buy that product.
We're talking about 12, 13-year-old kids that really it shouldn't be available to.
Well, this is where we're talking about the system of putting in a sticker that says this contains explicit lyrics. In my opinion, if a kid goes into a record store and sees that and thinks, oh, there's dirty words on that, I'm going to pick that up.
But if a 13-year-old can't go to see an R-rated movie
and can't buy a packet of cigarettes
and can't buy booze at a certain age, there must be some merit in some grading system. No, I don't like censorship either, but if you had a grading system, because record companies might think like movie companies, that, gee, if we get an R rating, we're not going to sell as many tickets. If we get an R rating, we're not going to sell as many CDs, and maybe, especially younger people. Would that work?
Look, there are two problems with that. I mean, one is that just because you've got some system of control doesn't mean that you're actually going to control the problem. If I want to find out where to get marijuana, which I don't particularly, but if I did, I'd go and ask an 11 or 12-year-old at school, because they all know.
But Graham, what you're saying is that if you, because you don't feel that you can control it, let it go. What comes after this?
What I'm saying is, I think we're actually asking the wrong question, which is, why are these particular kids seeking out these particular
because
words
the music is terrific.
The music? That may be, but there's other terrific music around.
I love the rap music. It's not all the groups, it's just some of the groups.
Exactly, and I think that's an important thing to put across here today, that not all music, not all contemporary rock music, metal music, rap music contains that kind of language.
Absolutely not.
The majority of it, the music that we play in this band Fight that I'm with now, talks about real issues, social issues, valuable points. In all of my career as a musician, I've never written anything that I would consider to be negative. It's always misconstrued by people that don't understand it, and that's when the fear factor comes in, and that's when people start to attack you for the wrong reasons.
When you're talking about mothers in the audience, I'm sure there are a lot of mothers here today that the most you've ever said about your children's music is, turn that rubbish down. It's too loud, right? So you are flying blind.
Yes, they have no idea. I had no idea. I just decided and I'm an entertainer. I do comedy. I'm not screaming about the expletive as much as the message.
They certainly demean women, a lot of them.
Oh, they're terrible. And you've got groups of children now referring to girls as bitches. Like the women's movement, fought for equality and recognition by men as being, that we're equal. They're throwing it all away because There is no respect for women. These kids today, accepting this, are going to finish up with less than what we had before the women's movement started.
How does your son defend himself over this? Does he say it's harmless?
He just didn't even see why I was making such a fuss about it.
But isn't that important? Isn't that important? If he said, "Mum, this is really disturbing me. This is making me think, you know, bad things," and
but he
take
wouldn't
on a different
say
attitude.
that. He wouldn't even. It wouldn't occur to him that it might be damaging. And now that I know about it, at least I can sit and talk to him and say, "Well, hey man, maybe that's not the thing."
That's the very important thing that you do talk.
My sense is what we should be doing is using it as some kind of window of opportunity and sitting down with the kids and saying, "Look, how are you feeling? And how come you go for this really angry, enraged kind of music? Is that how you're feeling inside? And if so, how? And if so, am I contributing to that? And can I change that for you?"
But put an X rating on it first.
But we had Christopherson on the program earlier. He did a great song once called "Blame It on the Stones," and I think that could be what we're talking about here to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, to some extent, I think that...
The parents should blame the music for perhaps sometimes bad parenting.
You summed it up earlier on by saying all of this started with Elvis. I remember, don't remember, but I mean, when Elvis did the Ed Sullivan Show, they wouldn't show him from the waist down because his hips were wiggling about, and I thought that was rude, you know. And so there'll always be that side of it, and I know that that's not as offensive to some people as the bad language that we just saw on the screen.
We have a great contingent of women out there today who are single parents like me. I'm a single parent. I've got to go to work. I've got to support my child. He's too young to be left alone. He's too old for a babysitter. You trust the families that you know that your son is going to stay with. There are too many influences outside that we've never experienced in our society before. We've got things that have never happened before with the videos, with the movies. I mean, you can't go to the movies without seeing humping backsides anymore. There's the magic word, the four-letter word all the time. Oh, sorry about that.
I was just asked to submit a paper to a Senate hearing in America last week. There's a huge debate just happened in the States just a few days ago on this very issue, particularly towards women. And let me just say, from my point of view, that I myself find that kind of attack on women particularly extremely offensive. I don't agree with it at all, but by the same token, I think what you were saying about having the freedom of being able to express yourself in any given way is important to adults. Yeah,
yes.
I think that's the main point.
Yes,
all right, we're out of time. Thanks for coming in.
Darren, I have a meeting at 24th of March at Canterbury Hurlston Park RSL, and any parents that feel the same way as I do about this, please come, because if we make a big enough noise, maybe we can get some changes to it.
So they sit down and talk with their kids first?
That's the
I
very
think
good
they should
advice
listen
there
to the
from
music
Dr. Martin.
first, and then they'll certainly be there.
And can I put a plug in for Fight? We're playing at Salinas tomorrow night in Sydney. Come and see us.
All right. Hey, would you please thank our guests? We'll be back for more after the break.